Hey friends, so today's YouTube video is going to be a lot of fun. Tomorrow I am going to be having a live stream with my friend Sassy Atheist. I will be creating the event after this live stream, but for right now what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be talking about some different stuff, talking about and related to the YouTube dumpster fire that we all kind of live in. It's a special kind of hell. And for those of you who don't know, this is going to be my space to talk about what's going on with Carlos Maza, Steven Crowder, The Blaze, Vox, and all those other folks. And hey, friends, I'm super glad that some people could make it. I didn't intend for today's stream to be about this. I was going to use today to talk about some aspect of asexuality, but after not having a particular plan, I decided that maybe this would be something neat to do instead. So for those of you who don't know what's going on with YouTube and some of the fears that some folks are having about something akin to an ad apocalypse, though not necessarily that, just YouTube demonetizing channels left and right, which is the current scope of things. Basically, what's been going on is that at the beginning of the month, Carlos Maza, who is a Vox employee and is a queer Latino person, and the only reasons I say that is because it does relate to the topic at hand. As a queer Latino, I'm not using that in a disparaging manner. I'm stating it as a matter of fact because it's true. Carlos runs Vox's Strike Through channel, and not Vox's Strike Through channel. He runs the series Strike Through on Vox. And I considered having the whiteboard and using it. I was thinking that that might have made things easier, but there was so much different writing to do that it would have been difficult for me to get this ready on time. I decided to do this earlier today, just because I thought it'd be nice for me to air some of my thoughts and for me to talk about some aspects of this that are being under-discussed. But basically what's been going on is that Vox's Strike Through is a series that talks about the intersection of media and politics. It's run by Carlos Maza, who's a super cool guy. I'm super excited that so many folks are in the comment section just chilling with us, sharing your insights. I'm hoping that we're going to learn from each other and stuff. I have YouTubers and subscribers on my channel from all over different parts of the internet. So if you're here, I'm super excited. Most of my folks are queer atheists, but a lot of us aren't. Some of us are queer theists. Some of us are queer folks who don't really care about religion. Like, I'm a queer person who doesn't care all that much about religion. I'm an atheist, but I find religion a little bit fascinating. I'm interested in paganism and polytheism, but I'm not a pagan or a polytheist. I am an avowed atheist, which a lot of people find unfortunate, and I'm frequently accused of not being that by a range of different folks. But my insights on all of this, I'm going to be talking about all of that in a little bit. But I'm sorry, Ada, that you're not going to be able to stay on for super long, but I'm glad that you're here with us right now. I hope that you can come back later and check out the whole thing. So what's been going on is that after Vox's Strike Through started, a popular conservative named Steven Crowder started making rebuttals to it. And I'm using the word rebuttal a little bit loosely, but the word rebuttal is actually an important word for the full context of this. And in those rebuttals, he made jokes that targeted Carlos on the basis of Carlos's nationality and Carlos's sexuality. I'm mostly saying this so that way we're all on the same basic page. I know that most of my friends probably have like the basic idea of what's going on, but anyone who comes across this later, or when this event is long forgotten and alien anthropologists arrive on Earth and look at the internet, if this is one of the videos they manage to see, that way they have the full context available to them, because you never know if they're going to need it or whatever. But basically, after years of enduring this sort of targeted harassment, Carlos decided to directly talk to YouTube and directly challenge YouTube to check out the videos. And they did, and their initial assessment was that because the video's primary purposes were not harassment, or at the very least that was their view and that was their opinion of the video's primary purposes, they decided not to do anything about it. And then after they received a torrent of backlash from that decision, they ultimately decided to demonetize on certain bases some of the videos. And that's basically where we are right now. The videos absolutely contained hate speech. The videos absolutely contained harassment, but because technically the videos were marketed as rebuttals to Carlos's content, that is the justification that they're using. And understanding all of this is helpful for understanding the full context. Most of our opinions probably most of us here are probably going to disagree with different aspects of this. Some of us might disagree with different stuff. This is a space where you can air your opinions. You can let us know what you think. You can let me know what you think. I have a fairly nuanced opinion on this, but I am irritated by so many different things that I decided I'd throw my hat in the ring and let people know what was going on and share my opinions with folks. I'm not going to say that I'm a legal expert or anything, but I do think that most folks don't understand the full context. I think that most folks didn't really read all of YouTube's response. YouTube's response was nonsense. It was a very bad response, and they absolutely did the wrong thing. They followed the sort of letter of their own laws as opposed to following the spirit of their own laws. And most folks are thinking that they should have followed, at the very least, most folks in my social circles. I'm not going to say most folks, but most of the folks that I know have chimed in some way or another. Most of us haven't created the full video. Most of us aren't doing what I'm doing. But also, I might talk about some of the stuff that's going on with other spaces that I'm involved in, which include people like Tracy Harris, because I'm a member of the Progressive Secular Alliance, which is a pretty cool group if you don't know what they are. So, oh, there are folks here who aren't atheists. I think it's really cool that now my audience is so diverse that not everyone here is an atheist. Some of us are polytheists, some of us are Christian. I know that I have a few Muslim viewers, but those are like, I think that there's only like one or two. And it's just because my audience is chill. I rarely do videos that directly talk about or challenge religion because I feel like there are smarter voices than me out there doing that, and there are people who care more about that sort of thing than I do. I focus more on the humanism side of secular humanism, and I challenge religion when it matters. I challenge religion, especially homophobic religions, on a range of different things, but I don't really care all that much about like whether or not religion's true or not. Oh, Yariv, it's nice to see you. I probably always butchered that, so I'm sorry that I probably couldn't pronounce that, which is weird because looking at it, to me, it seems like a Hispanic name, but there are a whole bunch of Hispanic names I have a hard time pronouncing. But basically, my whole take on this is fairly nuanced. There is a YouTube channel called The Humanist Report, which did a really, really good long video that talked about this in depth. It was like a solid 25 minutes. And the full 25 minutes were really great. They were some of the most nuanced and some of the most developed commentary that I've seen on this. I recommend folks go check that out. Let me know what they think later on, not necessarily right now. I am a big fan of what Mike, who was the person on the Humanist Report, I think he's like the main person of the Humanist Report who was doing the commentary. It's really nice. Also, there's so many folks here today. I wasn't expecting this video to actually have like a really big audience. I'm hoping that folks won't necessarily like and share, but if you want to, that's nice. I appreciate that. That helps this video go up later on. But also, I hope that folks will let me know what they think about all of this, because ultimately, okay, so some folks there. So the atheist community of Austin. I'm gonna backtrack because the Progressive Secular Alliance is related to that. I'm a member of the Progressive Secular Alliance. I'm friends with some of the folks over there. The Progressive Secular Alliance is a pro-Latinx, not pro-Latinx. It's a pro-LGBT secular group that exists from some folks that left, among other places, the atheist community of Austin, and also other just pro-queer and pro-LGBTQ secular folks who were frustrated, all of that. And the Carlos Maza and Steven Crowder thing that's going on is the big news that we're here today to discuss, because the backlash from it and the dumb decisions that all happened to a whole bunch of creators are really frustrating to a lot of people. I wanted to give my audience a place to listen to it, learn about it, talk about it. That's the purpose of this hangout. I probably will, if I can get some of the other folks from the Progressive Secular Alliance to come on here, I probably will use my channel to help that channel grow in size, because I think the Progressive Secular Alliance is really cool. As a queer secular person, I like that there are spaces that are like that create lots of community for a whole bunch of different people. That'd be a neat thing to do. Also, part of the reason why people here are talking about that is that I shared this live stream as it's happening to that channel. So some of those folks over here chilling with us today, super excited. We had an abortion discussion a couple weeks ago where we talked about the string of abortion laws, and I was one of the people, along with Faithless Southerner and a couple of other secular folks and secular YouTubers. Later on, I'm hoping that we'll be doing more video discussions, because those were super cool. They were really neat. Lots of my new people are people from over there, because I've been plugging all of my links pretty aggressively over there. And that's all of that stuff. But if you're new and this is the first time you're ever hearing about what's going on with YouTube, because you're not a big YouTuber, lots of the people here probably don't pay that much attention to YouTube. But if you don't pay that much attention to YouTube, lots of creators are worried that because of what's going on between Carlos, Steven, Blaze, and Vox, that a whole bunch of independent content creators are going to be targeted. People have falsely been led to believe that Steven Crowder is an independent YouTuber. He is not really an independent YouTuber. He is very closely affiliated with The Blaze. The Blaze, in fact, has full episodes of his show, Louder with Crowder, up on it. That's part of the reason why there's this thing called the Mug Club, which is the number of people who go on to The Blaze and they pay either $99 a year or $69 a year in order to have access to full episodes, either weekly, monthly, or daily. I don't know all that much about that platform, but one of the important things here is that people have been lied to and have been led to believe that Crowder is an independent content creator, that he represents the so-called little guys in this context. That is not true. The Blaze, hey Beach, The Blaze is a conservative media site. It's a conservative media conglomerate. It is Glenn Beck's group. It is a fascinating group. I'm not a big fan of it, but I don't like conservative media, not just because I'm not a conservative, but because I don't really like that sort of thing. I think that The Blaze mostly publishes nonsense, and I pay attention to a lot of their coverage. I want to be a politician, so part of the reason why I do live streams like this is so that I can practice my public speaking skills. I want to be a politician, so I pay attention to news sites and media groups from across the political spectrum. And The Blaze is, it's a frustrating group. They used to have Tomi Lahren before Tomi Lahren decided to be right maybe 2% of the time and outed herself as pro-choice. And then when she outed herself as pro-choice and criticized some of the people over at The Blaze kicked her out. And there was this whole big thing. It was a really frustrating thing that happened in 2017 and 2018. If you pay attention to conservative media commentators, which people probably should. That's not the same as taking them seriously, but understanding that these are people with influence, these are people with powerful platforms. We should pay a little bit of attention to them, which frustrates me. I don't like the fact that I had to say that. That's not the same as thinking that they're telling the truth. But it's important, at the very least, those of us who want to understand why it is that people believe the things that they do probably should. So the thing with Tomi Lahren was a couple of years ago, Tomi Lahren revealed that she was pro-choice. This has actually been a consistent thing of hers. This isn't really new information. But when she was outed as pro-choice, when she revealed that she was pro-choice, she got backlash from The Blaze, and she criticized The Blaze. And then The Blaze fired her. She filed a lawsuit against The Blaze. I don't know if that went anywhere. I don't pay attention to her. But her being pro-choice has actually been I'm not trying to defend her, I'm just stating a fact. Her being pro-choice has actually been a pretty consistent thing of hers. Obviously, she is who she is, so she's not always paying attention to this. She doesn't talk about it half as much as she should. But an example of this is that she spoke out against the Alabama abortion ban. I retweeted her. I liked her tweets talking about it because she was just right. She called it a cruel bill that wouldn't go anywhere, that wouldn't help anyone, and that wasn't pro-life. And she was right on all of those things. And I'm one of those people that I give people credit where credit's due. Earlier today, I found myself agreeing with Lauren Chen when she talked a little bit about pride parades. She was wrong with a lot of what she said. She talked about the so-called over-sexualization of pride parades. It was nonsensical. But and I agree with what Chenna just said. Chenna's right. I agree that it doesn't forgive her for what she does, but I do think it's important that when people say things that are correct, we point out that sometimes even a broken clock can be right. Broken clock is right twice a day, whatever that expression is in English. And yeah, even people I don't respect can be right from time to time. And obviously, both Tomi Lahren and Lauren Chen are nonsensical. They're morons that people shouldn't pay attention to, who don't deserve the platforms they've been given. But people want to pretend that these are intelligent people. People want to pretend that these are people deserving of big platforms. So whatever. So unfortunately, they matter. And I'm being very loose with a lot of my words here. But the main thing that I want to talk about here is how it is that YouTube's recent actions are going to affect all commentators, all people who create content on YouTube. And the reality is that it is. And we know that this is at least partially true. It's easy to think that this is hyperbole. But if you are someone who wants to do political content, if you're someone who wants to create historical content, if you're someone who wants to examine controversial topics, and you also want to make a living on YouTube, there's the reality that YouTube, one, has never really been a sustainable platform for that sort of thing. It has never, in any point that it's existed, been a reliable place for people who want to do political commentary on the right or on the left. And some people are going to say that it has a bias one way or another. Usually people say that the bias is against them, whatever that means, given that person's political beliefs or their religious beliefs. And I feel like that there's probably some evidence of that in a range of different directions. But basically, if you're someone who, say, wants to talk about the political tactics of a controversial group, say, for example, the Ku Klux Klan. If you try to put up content that they created, whether it was literature or it was videos in some cases, or it was photographs, you are going to have to be weary. And that has kind of always been the case, but that's the case more now that YouTube is trying to overcompensate for what happened to Carlos. And a lot of people are going to say that there's no way that all of this happened this quickly. That's probably true. Odds are this was going to happen one way or another. But because of that, people are, at the very least, some folks are trying to aim at Carlos and saying that Carlos is the problem. Carlos is not the problem. Carlos has never been the problem. The problem is that some folks on YouTube understand that YouTube works based off of clicks, and that bigger content creators can more easily and more egregiously break the rules of YouTube, and it would be harder for YouTube to make a move against them. And that's exactly what happened here. And it is really frustrating because there are people who are calling this the Vox adpocalypse, the Voxpocalypse, or whatever, and that is absolutely not the right direction to be taking this. You can disagree with some of what Carlos did. You shouldn't disagree with Carlos's initial decision to be like, hey, I've been harassed for years. My comment section are filled with homophobic and racist nonsense because Steven Crowder's followers are directed to come over onto my channel and they are inspired to take action against me. And that's something that we should be talking about. It's something that is absolutely true. And I'm not saying that Steven Crowder or The Blaze intentionally sends their followers. I'm not saying that, like, you can go and find tweets saying, like, Steven Crowder being like, hey, let's go into this video and dogpile it. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that because of the vitriolic nature of Steven Crowder's attacks against Carlos and against Vox, his followers feel emboldened to go over onto Carlos's content and to dogpile it. They mass downvote it. They do a whole bunch of other things like comment despicable things on it. And if you don't believe me, go check out the comment sections of any of the strike through videos. I'm not saying that the top rated comments are going to be the worst things you've ever seen, but the reality is that they're these people have a community, and this community is strong, and they feel emboldened to do these things. Now they feel it a lot more strongly, which is frustrating. And it's partially because Carlos said that the right thing to do would be to go onto these channels, and when you find things that break YouTube's terms of service, you should report it, which you should be doing. And I understand that that in and of itself might not be a popular thing to do. I'm not suggesting that people should go and make a mass flagging campaign. I'm suggesting that a YouTuber who is on YouTube agrees to follow YouTube's terms of service. And if they are breaking YouTube's terms of service, or if they're being hateful, bigoted people, it is normal for people to want to go onto their platforms and report it. And that is not at all the same thing as calling for a mass flagging campaign. And also, that is not what Carlos did. Carlos said that people should go onto his content, find the content that is actually breaking the rules, and report it. That is not the same thing as saying going onto all of his videos and mass flagging them. And I read the tweets. I know that what I'm saying is accurate. And I also know that me defending that course of action might not be the most popular thing. I understand that. I understand our gut reactions, especially those of us who are atheists, who create atheistic content. I understand that our initial reaction is probably going to be that we should be weary of mass flagging campaigns. And I agree, but the reality is that Steven Crowder was breaking YouTube's terms of service. And going against Steven and going onto his channel and accurately reporting that he is breaking YouTube's terms of service, that he is harassing someone, which he is, and that he's going after the same person over and over again, all of these things are violations of YouTube's terms of service. And I get that pointing this out isn't the funnest thing in the world, but this has to be a place where we value facts. If we care about objectivity, if we care about honesty, we have to talk about this in the right way. And also, hey friends, I know that this video isn't going to be a video that contains sections that everyone agree with. I understand people being frustrated by Carlos calling for milkshaking people, but that's not really the point here. And you know what? If you were talking about a wider conversation about speech, this probably would be, but this is about a range of different things, not just supposed free speech and unlimited speech. And I'm not going to get into this thing about hate speech and free speech because that is not the conversation here. It's so important that we be focused on what's going on. And what's going on is that there was someone on YouTube who was repeatedly and egregiously and willfully breaking YouTube's rules. And YouTube decided that their best course of action originally was to stand by that creator. And that was a bad decision. And now they are overcompensating because they felt an enormous amount of backlash, and they're going after innocent people. And this is an area that has so many nuances, and there's so many different things that people could talk about. One of the things that frustrates me that is severely underplayed in all of this, and it's partially because it's Pride Month, but the reality is we are not talking about the racism in Steven Crowder's comments. We're not talking about the racism that Steven Crowder's followers show against Carlos. And that's a problem. We should be talking about it. It's a thing that we shouldn't be ignoring just because some people want to focus on the homophobia. And we can talk about both things, you guys. And I understand, oh my goodness, there's just so many different dimensions that this conversation could take. And the reality is we probably should have individual conversations. We probably should have different creators talking about different aspects of this. And it is so frustrating because this is one of those things that needs and deserves a nuanced conversation. And the reality is you can agree that the homophobia and racism was wrong and should be at the center of this conversation, while disagreeing with some of what Carlos said. You can disagree with the decision by Carlos to call for a more aggressive action against Steven. I don't know how I feel about that personally, because I understand, and I'm gonna be charitable here, which some people are gonna disagree with, but I'm gonna be charitable here. I'm going to say that the reality is that Stephen probably does feel like he's under attack, and he probably does feel like he is the weaker person, but that's not true. And he probably also feels like he's this independent content creator, but he isn't. He is backed by The Blaze. The Blaze shows his content, even if YouTube completely deplatforms him, which I don't know if I would agree with. I'm going to be completely honest, and that's probably a little bit unpopular among my particular followers. I don't know if I would agree with the decision to completely deplatform Stephen. If that was the decision that was made, I would be ambivalent about it. And I get that that's unpopular, but it's not like that means that Stephen would lose anything, because he wouldn't. His content would still be viewable. His fans would still upload segments of his show to YouTube. He would still be able to respond to Carlos. He would lose one specific area, and that would suck. But he's egregiously, willfully, and aggressively breaking the rules. And we know this. And the reason we know this is that after all of this started, he didn't ease up. He didn't change his tone. If he wants to be on YouTube, he should probably be willing to follow YouTube's rules, especially because I know that if I did what he did to the right, if I did the equivalent, I would probably lose my platform as a much smaller media creator. And it's because YouTube would make the decision to enforce its own rules against me because I'm smaller and because I don't have the same voice. YouTube was probably afraid to go against Stephen on the basis that Stephen has a big audience and his audience is powerful. They're engaged and they're aggressive. And the reality is that, like, losing, I'm going to be completely honest, unless you're one of the most popular left-wing content creators on YouTube, odds are your audience is not even remotely as engaged as Stephen's is. And it's because Stephen uses a range of tactics to embolden his audience. He uses, among other things, saying what it is that his audience wants to hear as a way to keep them engaged and as a way to talk about the content. And people react to that. If I was hyper aggressively anti-theistic, and I mean more anti-theistic than most anti-theists on YouTube, but if I was consistently hyper anti-theistic, if I was as anti-theistic as I could be, odds are some of the people who watch my videos now would watch me more actively and they would comment more, they would like more, but they don't. And it's because I am not an anti-theist. I'm not particularly aggressive towards religion. I'm willing to challenge religion, and people like it when I make video responses to theists, especially when I make video responses to the worst kinds of theists. And I like making that sort of content, so I make it, and I use my own special brand of humanism. I use my own special brand of nuance. And I know that, like, most folks probably don't watch all of my content. As my audience has been getting bigger, there have been a wider range of folks who've been watching more and more of my content, especially my LGBTQIA content, especially my asexuality o'clock content. And I think that that's fun. I think that that's, like, really neat. And I did have thoughts when Milo Yiannopoulos was deplatformed. I didn't talk about Milo Yiannopoulos because Milo Yiannopoulos also didn't actually lose all that much. It's easy to think that these folks are losing a whole lot by losing YouTube, but they still have Twitter, they still have a range of other platforms, even when they are despicable people. And if you ask me, I'm going to say that Milo Yiannopoulos is probably a worse person than Steven Crowder. Part of the reason I didn't talk about that all that much was that YouTube wasn't affected. People who are in my sphere weren't affected. And some people are going to disagree with some of that, but the reality is I make historical content. I talk about history in some of my videos. There was a YouTuber whose videos included clips of Nazi speeches as a way to historically and honestly examine them, who was demonetized. And that person and a range of other people are worried that this is in relation to what's going on with Vox and the Blaze. And that's part of the reason I wanted to have this open platform where people could come and they could chat with me, where people could come and share their thoughts with me, because I want to know what it is that you all think. I am a historian. I talk about Latin American history. The reality is there's a lot of racism in that history. There's racism that in some cases and in some particular ways is far more aggressive than the racism that you'd see if you studied the antebellum South. And it's important that people talk about that. It's important that Hispanic, Latinx, Latino, Latina content creators be willing to engage with that sort of content. But if we're worried that YouTube is going to demonetize us because of something like this, then it's right for us to be worried about our livelihoods being affected. All of those things are fair. I haven't abdicated violence. I don't particularly agree with milkshaking people, although I feel like calling that violence is a little bit of the slippery slope. And part of the reason I don't talk about that this much is because I'm a peace and conflict studies person. People wouldn't be happy if they heard me talking about this. And sometimes I think about talking about it and I decide that ultimately it's not worth it. The reality is that milkshaking someone probably isn't violence. I feel like we are going down a little bit of slippery slope, but conservatives will use it as justification when their own folks commit violence against minoritized and marginalized people. So that's part of the reason I haven't talked about it, because I know that people who watch my content, if I say that, people are not going to like it. People are going to start to say that I'm being a little bit too loose, but I am a Hispanic person. People from my community have been attacked by conservatives, physically, verbally. I'm not cool with some of that stuff. And if I talk about like a whole bunch of this, people are going to get annoyed and it's going to affect my livelihood. And that's one of the things that we do need to be considerate of here. And the reality is that it does suck that some people, including some moderate conservatives, they're like losing income. They're losing their ability to make a living. And I know that that's also probably not a super popular opinion. And I'm not talking about Stephen when I talk about this. I'm talking about smaller independent news networks that don't publish conspiracy theories, that are just like, hey, we are super okay with a lot of other stuff because there's diversity in both parties. There are people who aren't complete scumbags who are conservatives. There are people who are complete scumbags who are liberals. And all of this nuance and stuff isn't super popular. It's super fun for people to be, hyper progressive, hyper right wing. And I'm a hyper progressive person. I'm further to the left than 90% of the people that I know. But I also I'm also nuanced. I study violence. I study history. And so much of the stuff is worth talking about, that this YouTube chat's going to be a disorganized mess. And it's okay that this YouTube chat's a disorganized mess. This situation is a disorganized mess. This whole thing that we're having to talk about is frustrating. It rightfully frustrates so many of us. And we don't know how to feel about this, partially because there's so much information that it's difficult to make, I guess, hyper opinionated conclusions about all of this stuff. I probably will have more organized. I'm going to be having more organized live streams later on in the week. I'm going to be having Sassy Atheist on tomorrow. We're going to be talking about what it's like being atheist, being queer, being ex-Christian. That's going to be a super fun chat. This is not a super fun chat. I like the comments. I like learning about what you guys think. I think that your guys' takes are important. I think that it's important when you guys agree with me. I think it's important when you guys disagree with me. I think that in the long run, having nuanced conversations is going to help us all. I also think that and also it is true that opposing violence against fascists is supporting the violence of fascism. That's a true fact. But the reality is there are a range of different things that people need to be considerate of. I'm worried that people are going to amp up violence and that ultimately people who are already unsafe, people who are already targeted, are going to end up being more targeted, and they're going to come under physical attack already, which is part of the reason, and part of the reason for nuance for all of this. I do think that milkshaking someone isn't violence. I'm going to be explicit about that. If someone wanted to milkshake me, I wouldn't say that that's assault. But I can understand why it is that folks are going to use that to advance their agenda. I understand why it is that people are going to use that and say that it is violence. And I also know that there are ultimately things that are going to happen that will involve violence. And I'm not going to say that violence is a sort of moral absolute, as in violence is always bad, because that's objectively untrue. Violence, just like everything else, is morally neutral. And ultimately, we do need to consider the context of so many different things before it is that we try to come to some sort of moral understanding of it. And it's important to have an actual conversation about that. And I think it's fair that some people don't want to talk about nuance. I think it's frustrating hearing about nuance. I know that I myself wish that things were cut and dry. I wish that this were easier topics. I wish that things made more sense and that people cared more about truths as opposed to what they believe. I have a feeling that it would probably be easier to survive if people cared more about what was true than what fit their beliefs. But here we are. It's 2019, guys. Welcome to hell. It's fun to have these sorts of conversations. I wish that, and I hope that I can have live streams with a range of different people. I could hear people's takes live, and I could use my platform to help people advocate for different things, help people share their own insights. And I would like to do that. See, I think I'm going to start reading some more of the comments, because this is how I look at my comments. And sometimes it's difficult for me to keep track of all the stuff that's going on. I appreciate that people are here, that people are chatting with me. I like that this is an area where I like that this is an area wherein we can share our own insights. I used to do policy chats on Friday. I probably will get back into that. And I think that some of those times I think that I'm going to get back into that. I think that that's a fun thing. And I think that in the future, I'm probably going to try to talk more about like actual policy as opposed to the sort of hellscape that is YouTube in 2019. And I feel like YouTube is kind of like being in hell, I would imagine, wherein like a whole bunch of people are saying things that are true and correct, and they're not getting very many views. And those are the people who are trying to use nuance, intelligence, and creativity. And then we see people who are hyper partisan, who have tens of thousands, in some cases hundreds of thousands, or even millions of views. To me, that's what hell would be. And I made this joke the other day when Trump made his tweet about the moon being part of Mars. I joked that like I had died and I was wondering if this was my personal hell. And that tweet unexpectedly blew up. It got like 15 likes. I wasn't expecting it to. I sort of made it really offhand. So to see it positively blow up was completely unexpected. I didn't think it deserved to blow up. But also, yeah, the president of the United States tweeted that the moon was part of Mars. And it was such a confident tweet that I actually had to check before I wanted to be 100% sure. I was like, you know what? I'm going to have to make sure that I'm not wrong. And of course I wasn't. Of course the president is ignorant. But it was so weird that the president of the United States in 2019 tweeted that the moon was part of Mars. If someone told me that there was a massive apocalypse and that we've all died and that this is just hell, yeah, I would believe it. And I agree with I agree with folks who are saying death to capitalism, dismantle the state, and patriarchy, all that stuff. I'm on board with you. Capitalism is part of the problem that produces this very special kind of hell. And it is it's so interesting to see so many different people in my comment section. I really like this is a really neat chat. It's a positive space where people are disagreeing respectfully, and I appreciate that. Boy, the comments on this video, I really hope that the comments on this video after the live stream's over, and I'm gonna end it in like a few minutes. I probably will do I probably will do like a more regular video today and then upload it tonight, like I did for yesterday, where I did my video talking about Puerto Rico. Also, if folks want to talk about Puerto Rico, that'd be cool, because I really like talking about Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico is my favorite place in the world after Honduras. And that's funny because I'm Puerto Rican. And I'm also a Puerto Rican independence seeker, which is always a really funny thing to talk about. Some people are like, I'm sure that some people are super ready to disagree with me on that, but I feel like because of the fact that I was just talking about expanding what it is that it means to be an independence seeker for Puerto Rico, most folks were just chilling, and the people who commented left really smart comments. I really wasn't expecting that video to have the positive reception that it had. I feel like in the future, when I talk about some of the justifications that people might have for being pro-independence seeker, that video probably won't be as popular, but that's fine, because I know that this is a minority position. And also, I think it's neat to see that folks are talking about ACAB. I'm a big fan of Thought Slime. I thought that was a really good video. I was interested in like watching the full thing because I agreed with the basic premise, and I feel like the basic premise is a lot more complex than ACAB would probably suggest. And I think it's cool. Also, context is in fact super important, regardless of what issue it is that we're talking about, especially when it comes to a thing like YouTube. Context is part of the reason it is that this issue is so goddamn frustrating for people like me, because as a historian, context is literally the reason why it is that people should be posting this sort of controversial content and then dismantling it or examining it and putting it in the proper historical context. Context is everything on the internet, guys. And if context is thrown out the window, then it's basically impossible to have an important, nuanced conversation. Also, ACAB, it's the acronym that means all cops are bad. The first place I heard it was a Thought Slime video. If you guys don't watch Thought Slime, you probably should. Even if you don't necessarily agree with the videos, I do think it's important that people watch a broad range of content. I do this, and I understand why it is that people are ready to disagree with that, but I think it's partially because I do want to be a politician. I want to understand why it is that people believe what they believe, and I also want to see what I can do to change people's minds. But in order to be able to effectively change their minds, I think it's important that I have an understanding of what their beliefs are and where their beliefs come from. And I agree with ACAB in the context of the institution of policing. And yeah, and I understand. Yeah. Also, let's see. Oh, I didn't know it had a different context in the UK. Cool. Good to know. I probably will do more videos talking about like what it means to be a post-capitalist, because that's my current position. I'm someone who has the basic political position of capitalism is not good. People can disagree on what we should do after capitalism, but if you ask me, it's important that people understand that capitalism is bad, and at the very least, capitalism needs reform, although a lot of people that I know would probably go a lot further and say that capitalism needs to be dismantled. And I would really like to hear a wider range of different positions. I've had a conversation with a syndicalist before. I had a conversation with a YouTuber named Chrismer. The Epicurean something. Someone's probably going to correct the name of that. Even if you think that capitalism is good, I think we can all agree to differing extents that at the very least there's parts of capitalism that aren't good. I am worried that there are people who unironically think that capitalism in its current form is like perfect and doesn't need any reforms at all. I would hope. Yeah, like even the position of needing to regulate capitalism, you see, even that is at the very least a position that's like capitalism isn't perfect. And I think that capitalism is not the policy that we need. I think that capitalism isn't the position we need. But at this point, we're just talking about this point, we're just talking about random stuff, which was always going to happen with us. I'm going to start to get back into the main topic of this video. A whole lot of this is going to be just left policy stuff, which is neat. I like that. I appreciate that my channel is now becoming an influx of leftist thought and leftist thinkers. That's cool. That's what I always wanted my channel to be, because I'm a humanist, and at the very least, my humanism is intrinsically left and believes that leftism and leftist policies are better than right-wing policies for the purpose of increasing happiness and stuff. And also, oh, I will do that. I will do that, Callie. That's cool. I don't know if I said your name right. Hope I did. If I didn't, might be. So I'm going to get back into the initial topic of this. What we need to be doing right now is we need to be creating strong content, and we need to be building up networks that are financially independent. Because the reality is that political people on YouTube, regardless of your political opinions, it's becoming harder and harder to make a living off of YouTube. And making a living off of YouTube is important. I would argue that for a lot of people, being able to make a living off of YouTube is actually pretty good. It's probably a net positive, even if it's not perfect. It can be a net positive without being perfect. But the reality is that YouTube's unreliable, and YouTube has a history of exploiting a lot of its creators, especially queer creators. As a queer creator, I am being exploited on YouTube. And as an asexual creator, that is even more true. And the reality is that it is harder for queer folks, especially smaller queer folks, to make a living off of YouTube. There are a range of obstacles that make it difficult for us. There's the fact that things like talking about being transgender, being trans on YouTube is usually instantly flagged as unsuitable for advertisers. And this is something that unites a lot of queer people regardless of political opinion. This is something that causes a lot of queer creators to feel solidarity with each other, even if politically, religiously, and socially they are on different sides. And this is something that's probably, like, that sensation is probably a good thing. It just sucks that the conditions that create it are so negative. Because the reality is, it's difficult for people who are queer on YouTube to make money off of YouTube. It's difficult for people who are political, especially people who have nuanced political opinions. And I'm not talking about centrists, because centrism isn't a nuanced political position. I'm talking about people who have a range of opinions and people who are willing to talk about those things. All of those things are harder to talk about on YouTube if you want to make a living. And that's part of the reason why it is that people supporting each other on Patreon is so important. It's part of the reason why some of the money I make goes towards independent content creators. And even though sometimes I have to scale back the support I can give because some months I have a harder economic time than others, just like a couple of other YouTubers, queer and secular, do. The reality is, I do my best to support my other creators. I do my best to uplift the creators who I believe deserve uplifting. And I'm trying to get better at, like, sharing people's videos. I've usually been pretty solid at sharing the videos of smaller creators. I've been pretty solid at helping smaller creators have a voice. I'm starting to have conversations with smaller creators right now. Earlier this week, Triatal was on my channel. And that was a super fun chat. And then Triatal's best friend came on and we had an after party. And that was super great. And I'm hoping that I can have more YouTubers on, especially YouTubers who want to create content, YouTubers who are secular, YouTubers who are queer, YouTubers who are Hispanic, and also eventually people who are sex workers and a range of other careers that are more difficult to have on YouTube and make a living off of YouTube. And I think it's important that we have conversations about this, that we acknowledge the reality is that events like what's going on right now make life on YouTube harder, because a lot of the best content creators on YouTube are people who depend on YouTube. And in some cases, those are people who make a couple $100,000 a month. And those are people who can afford to have resources. Those are people who can afford to pay for editors, which really sucks for people like me because unlike both Crowder and Carlos, I'm an actual independent content creator. So is Triatal. So is literally every single one of the people who's commenting right now. And sure, most of us probably don't want to make a living off of YouTube, but the reality is I would like to be able to make a living off of YouTube one day. I would like, as a humanist, as a queer person, as a Latino person, to be able to an extent, be my own boss and to be able to get paid to talk to my audience and educate my audience about a range of important issues, and also to create spaces where people can come and can learn from each other. And this is my way of saying that, among other things, I am going to be remaking my Discord. Part of the reason I say that is that I really liked my Discord. I'm not going to make that a Patreon only thing. I hate people who do that. I think that that's a really bad thing to do. I deeply dislike that. I understand the impulse behind it, but it's not something that I agree with, and it's not something that I'm never going to do. I'm not going to make it so that if you want to have a conversation with me, you have to be willing to pay me, or you have to hope that you are able to attract my attention somehow. As an asexual person, I want to be a resource for other asexuals. As a queer Latino, I want to be a resource for other queer Latinos. As a writer, I want to be a resource for other writers. And part of that is being open. But I sure hope that people who are able to support me and who make spending time on my channel something they do a whole lot of, consider supporting me. Because the reality is that makes it easier for me to do what I do. It enables me to make this a greater priority. For the first time ever, this coming month, I'm going to be making $30 off of Patreon. That is not a lot of money, but it's also a big deal because it means that, in my case, 6 folks on Patreon have seen the content that I support and have seen the content that I create and have decided that it's worth supporting. And that's something that makes it easier for me to make a living. And it's also something that enables me to focus more of my resources and time and energy on YouTube. Because YouTube is where I get a lot of my people who support me on Patreon from. YouTube is where I have the biggest consistent audience. A couple of my articles over on Patheos have gone viral. Some folks are able to find me from other places because I write all over the net. People can find me on sites like Enclave, which is the digital magazine. They can find me on Patheos. They can find me all over the place. But YouTube is where I make the most content. It wasn't always like this, but it is now. And it's also where I like spending most of my time. I think it would be really fantastic to be able to create a live stream that has 100 viewers or that has even 50. I think that having that many voices and being able to chat with that many different people, regardless of whether they agree with me or not, would be really cool. And it's part of that reason that I'm super excited that my channel is expanding. I'm super glad that people are here. And I'm hoping that we can also create other content. I'm hoping that I can inspire my audience to become content creators. And if my videos inspire folks to make videos, I want to know, even if those videos are in some cases responses to and even rebuttals of the content that I make. I think being here is part of being in a conversation. But relating this back to what's going on between Carlos and Steven, just because we are engaged in a conversation doesn't mean that someone should be able to bully people. And doesn't mean that we should enable people to use slurs and bigoted language. And it doesn't mean that we have to be okay with that. And the reality is that people like Steven are not actors who are acting in good faith. And we know that because after everything was said and done, Steven responded the way that Steven responded. If Steven had been someone who is interested in acting in good faith, he could have issued an actual apology instead of a satirical and obviously sarcastic apology, and he could have stopped using the same sort of language that he did. Because the reality is that it's okay for conservative content to be up on YouTube, but it's probably not okay for YouTube to just ignore language that is so consistently hateful and bigoted, and also is so consistently targeted at the same person. People can disagree on some of the nuances of that, and that's fine. People don't have to agree with me, but I am glad that I'm over here creating this space. And I'm glad that I'm over here supporting people, supporting my community, and I'm glad that I'm over here listening to y'all. And hopefully, people are listening to me. Hopefully, we're learning from each other. I think that I learn from the people who watch my content. I think that because of the content I create, I'm smarter, not because I made that content, but because I got the reception that I got. And it's super cool that people are over here chilling with us. People are over here learning from me. I like to believe that I'm learning from y'all. It's just a really neat time. And if people are interested, today I actually can do an asexuality o'clock live stream. I might do that. I guess if folks really want me to, I probably will, because I can just talk about what it's like. You know, actually, I think I will. I think from 5:30 to 6:30, I'll probably talk about what it's like dating as an ace person, because I think that that's super cool, and I think that that's fun. I like dating as an ace person. I have dated both ace and allo people, and I'll talk about that because it's neat having that time. And I know that a whole bunch of folks, we will. Okay, I will talk a little bit about what happened yesterday, because yesterday I talked about how I was going to do a live stream. And I did do a live stream. There were unfortunate circumstances surrounding it. And yesterday, a family pet died. And I'm not saying this for sympathy. I'm saying this so that people can understand what happened yesterday. So what happened yesterday was I had a live stream scheduled. I was going to talk about isekai stories. I am still going to do this stream. I don't know when. It's not going to be today. Today I'm going to talk about what it's like being an ace person and dating. And that's going to be super fun. I also really like live streams because live streams give me, one, people are super engaged in the live streams. And also, yeah. So the full thing that happened yesterday was yesterday afternoon, my pet passed away. And that happened between 4:30 and 5:30. My live stream was scheduled for 6. I helped my family remove the body, and I helped us put the body in a better place. And I'm not going to get into all of that because I get emotional thinking about it. But when I started my live stream, I moved it back until 7. And then at 7 was when my family decided that we were going to go. They decided without telling me. But that was when we decided we were going to go and actually handle the body. And that was what we did. I started the live stream, and the live stream was cut off, so I deleted it. But I say all of that to show you what's going on my whiteboard right now. I normally wear headphones. I don't have a reason for wearing headphones. I just think that it might prevent some sort of feedback. It doesn't. But yeah, my whiteboard had things from isekai stories, including vocabulary and stuff. If people want me to try and do something with the whiteboard for the specifically for that live stream, I would be down to do that. But unfortunately, I don't know what I would put on it. That said, I really appreciate that people were here, regardless of whether we agree or disagree on some of the nuances. I do hope that there are basic things that we can agree on about this. I hope that regardless of what you think of everything that happened after, no one thinks that Carlos was wrong for reporting that he had been harassed for years. Because the reality is, that is not the wrong thing. You can say that Carlos's response afterwards might have been wrong. We can agree to disagree on that one or whatever. But I do hope that if one of your friends was a major YouTube person and they had been bullied for years and their comment section was filled with homophobic language and racist language and just toxic hatred, I really would hope. Also, thank you, Jamie. I appreciate that. I just really hope that we can at least agree on that basic fact that this is not Carlos's fault, that this is the fault of homophobic, racist people who target people on the basis of the fact that those people are LGBT and are a different race. And yeah, this has been an interesting stream. I will see y'all in an hour. If you are here and you want to come on the stream, if you guys want us to have an after party, let me know. The after party would probably be cool. I think it'd be cool to have other aces who've dated in the after party, because I've been an ace who's dated and I'm dating someone who's not ace, and it's always a really neat conversation to talk about so much of the stuff. So I'm looking forward to that stream, but I'm going to let you guys go for right now. Peace out, and I'll see you in an hour.